Good morning, everybody, and welcome to the Abacus My Council Services webinar. Thank you for joining and taking time out of what I know are busy calendars, and I'm guessing probably all of you are dialing in from home, or certainly most of you, and that is true of your presenters this morning, so we're all remotely distributed across the country. And we're going to spend the next hour, and we won't run longer than that, looking at how My Council Services can be effectively deployed to enable the increasing shift towards digital self-service for customers using eForms, a portal approach, and then the kind of first stage of customer contact through CRM and case management and so on. Before we get into the nuts and bolts of the content that we want to share with you this morning, I just want to go through a few frequently asked questions and a little bit of kind of, I suppose, house rules, if you will. I say we because there's two of us enabling this session this morning. It's myself, Bernie Simmons. I'm going to be your main facilitator and presenter in terms of the person whose voice you will hear this morning. So I'm going to be talking you through and showing you the demonstrations and so on. But I'm ably and crucially assisted by my colleague Rachel in the background. I'll talk more about Rachel's role over the next 60 minutes as we go through, as I deal with some of the FAQs in the next couple of minutes. So the first thing to mention is the session is being recorded. The reason that we do that is so that there's an on-demand version available for you and or other colleagues to watch after the event, should you want to do that, or indeed we have some folks that wanted to attend but are not able to make it because of diary commitments. So it facilitates viewing after the event to stream that live. So we'll be recording that, and we will be making that recording available to you all. We also use some slides, so some PowerPoint slides as part of the resources and content that we're going to share with you this morning. We will send those to you, so you'll have a PDF copy of those. By the time we've processed the recording, prepared the PDFs, and sent out those, it's usually kind of 24 to 48 hours after the event. So in the next couple of days, certainly by the end of the week, you'll have copies of all of the materials that you're going to see in the next 55 minutes or so. If you really like what you see and you want to run a live online event for colleagues, that's fine. We can do that at your request and tailor it to your particular requirements. That's something we do a lot of. In more, well, what used to be normal times, we would also offer that as an on-site activity. So we have in the past spent a lot of our time travelling on-site to visit with councils, to show them our technology and to talk about potential requirements and help them with due diligence in terms of technology selection. The vast majority of that, well, all of that actually, as we speak today, is being done virtually, but very effectively through that alternative medium, much less on-site now, for obvious reasons, as we weather the ongoing global health emergency. In terms of how we run these virtual events, they are a little bit different from a usual web meeting, and I'm sure most of you now would consider yourself veterans of running web meetings, whether you're using GoToWebinar, GoToMeeting that we use, whether you're using Microsoft Teams, Zoom, Skype for Business, or some other variation thereof. I'm sure you've tested out a number of them and have got used to doing them. One of the things we do, because we've got quite a large audience on this session, we mute all of the lines automatically. The reason for that really is when people are in offices, there was often background noise because of the predominance of open plan offices these days, and with everyone working usually from home facilities in the current situation, you might get domestic pets and children and the like barging into your workspace and creating unexpected and uncontrolled noise. So we mute everybody, so don't worry about that. If you've got someone clattering about in the background or whatever it might be, you're not going to disturb anybody because we mute everybody, so lines are muted. But that doesn't mean we don't want you to ask questions. And this actually, a kind of a practical level, is where Rachel is crucially important to proceedings. So Rachel is in the background and monitoring the console for the event, part of which is a chat facility. So on the GoToWebinar console, when you log in, there is a chat option. So that if you've got questions that you want to raise as we go through, please type those in. You can either type them to everyone or just to Rachel privately. It's entirely up to you. But if you've got questions, Rachel will pick those up and we'll deal with them in real time as we go through the event. If it's something that doesn't really lend itself to a kind of a fairly simple, one or two sentence answer via the chat facility, Rachel just may advise you that we'll pick that up with you offline or after the event, because it might be something that requires a bit more of a discussion. The reason for that really is we've tried to have the host or the main facilitator, or your presenter, dealing with questions as they go through, and it doesn't really work very well. It's too easy to get distracted when you're trying to do demonstrations and kind of talk to people about structured content. So Rachel helps in that regard invaluably, and will assist you with any questions that you may have, even if they're things to do with access to the event or whatever it might be. And if we need to, we will follow up with you afterwards on those. So hopefully that answers most of the obvious FAQs. In terms of agenda for the next, or the remainder of the hour, we will have you on your way by 11:30. We'll talk a little bit about the background to the current challenge in local government, and they are numerous, multifaceted. You will be familiar with all of them, I've no doubt, but it is worth spending a few minutes just kind of sharing our really shared challenges, because they relate both to the operational sharp end of public sector service delivery in the form of local government, but they also affect us as a vendor and a provider and a solutions partner to local authorities that only works with local authorities. So as your organisations have to adjust and adapt to meet these challenges, so have we, albeit through a slightly different lens, but we kind of share much of that pain, and there's no shortage of challenges, as I'm sure you'll be aware. We'll also provide you with a bit of a background and introduction to My Council Services. We'll talk briefly about local authorities already using the platform. I'll give you some examples of recent projects that we've been working on. And the majority of the time together, so certainly at least half an hour of our time together, probably a little bit more than that, will be given over to actually showing you the platform live and in action. We encourage question and we'll provide answer as best we can. We just ask you, as I said a moment ago, to do that through the chat facility, because we mute everybody's lines for reasons that I expanded on a few minutes ago. So that's the structure. We will have you on your way by 11:30, and we'll, without any further intro, we'll kind of get on with the main event. So, contemporary challenges to public sector service delivery. Well, I've put these in chronological order. So if you kind of work up from the bottom of the slide, from 2005 onwards, which seems like an awfully long time ago now, there was a fundamental shift in terms of the move towards digital. Prior to that, there had been, obviously, websites were around and they were somewhat interactive, but less so, much less so than they are today. But from 2005 onwards, you had certainly the launch of things like Facebook, 2004, Twitter, 2005, and just the ever moving and ever developing an evolution of technology that enables us to do more things through a range of different devices. And that brought with it both technological and behavioural changes, but it also brought with it shifts in customer expectation. And that applies very much to service users of public sector service delivery as it does to commercial service delivery. So whether you're Harrow, London Borough Harrow Council, or any other of our customers for that matter, you are subject to expectations that customers have where they want immediate responses and expect a channel of choice in terms of how they can contact you. And that has been ever evolving and certainly not diminishing over time. So that's kind of the early 2000s, if you will, if that wasn't enough to deal with. From 2007 onwards, and arguably still today to some extent, there was the financial crisis and financial crash and subsequent credit crunch and Great Recession. And again, local authorities very much found themselves at the kind of bleeding edge of that challenge in terms of the need to save money in the public sector purse. Regardless of how you feel about policies of austerity and so on and so forth, and their counterproductivity in some regards, there were things that all of us have had to deal with, whether we like them or not. And that manifested itself in local authorities, the need to deliver cashflow savings, the need to reduce the amount of physical resources, both people and assets, that you have at your disposal. And that was ongoing, really. And had it not been overtaken to some extent by events of this year, which is, as I mentioned already in my introduction, the global health crisis in the shape of COVID-19, which now brings a whole range of other challenges and enforced changes to our behaviour. So there's layer upon layer of things that, as a society or as societies in society in the UK and around the world, we've had to adapt to. And for good or ill, local authorities have found themselves very much at the front line of that. And when you put those things together, challenges to people's economic well-being and crucially their their own health, local authority service delivery is very much central to maintaining any sort of sense of normality, and in many cases, for your most vulnerable customers, maintaining a decent standard of living and quality of life and dignity in terms of going about your day-to-day activity. So you're right in the eye of that storm in many regards. And I think as a provider to local authorities, we've never been anything but impressed about the adaptability of those frontline public sector service organisations, and particularly local authorities. So plenty of challenges. Let's talk about some of the practicalities. If you look back historically and think about typical local government structure, I don't mean this in any pejorative or critical sense, it's merely an observation, but you think about the way that local authorities are set up. Take something like waste or social care as an example. These are complex, resource-intensive activities, and you're doing multiples of those across a whole range of different service areas. And there is a tendency when you're engaged in what are resource-intensive, complex, and crucially important service delivery activities that you tend to focus in on your particular area of specialism. Be that waste, social care, the administration of local revenues and benefits, housing administration and provision if you're involved in that as a local authority. Customer services is all focused on today. How do you field customers' inquiries that come in their hundreds and sometimes thousands on a daily basis? You've got a broad array of complex things to do. So there's a tendency to look inward within your service area. And when you do that from a leadership perspective, you tend to get duplication of both IT systems and administrative processes. There isn't always the opportunity to lift your head up organisation and look across the piece and make decisions that scale across multiple service areas. There are tendencies to buy IT for service areas in particular, and that, in the kind of eye of the financial challenges, is probably fair to say is suboptimal. You don't end up spending and investing your money in the most efficient way if you do that. So there's been a change in terms of the way that local authorities think, and they've become more, I would say, kind of enterprise-wide in terms of their view of things. So the schematic that I'm just starting to build up on screen now, it simplifies it and kind of distills it down into its very much kind of core component parts. But you've got typically an enterprise customer services function. A few short months ago, I would have caveated that by saying that it's not necessarily the case that all of those customer services staff have to be housed in a single call centre or a single office building. Looking back now, or stopping looking at that now, that's absolutely the case. Pretty much everyone is working remotely in one form or another, or only spending limited amounts of time in a council office or council headquarters. So the need for remote and distributed working is more important than ever. But a combined and generally kind of unified and enterprise administrative support resource, really referred to as customer services, that fronts the kind of the hard edge of service delivery in terms of refuse collection, health and leisure, social care, whatever it happens to be. But you've then got your service-specific functions sitting alongside and behind that customer service contact layer. And you've then got colleagues in IT who are busy making sure that you've got appropriate systems that are fit for purpose from a technology point of view. And part of the challenge from an IT perspective is how do we consolidate those number of systems, so enable the broad array of functions that we have to deliver for our customers as a local authority, but whilst trying to minimise the number of vendor relationships and the number of systems that we need to have. And in doing so, how do we federate and simplify and make more useful and more valuable the asset that is our data architecture? So that's a very kind of simplified version of a local authority structure. And one of the reasons for drawing that out for you and going to bring you some attention to it really is it just allows me to build up the rest of the slide that kind of maps to that, the way that our technology, the My Council Services platform, maps to that contemporary structure and the operational model for a local authority. So the bit that we'll focus on today, in the remaining time that we've got together, is really kind of up here. So that's really the kind of customer self-service piece, and how do you kind of administer that first point of contact and make digital that first point of contact across the broad array of service areas that we've already referenced. And that, of course, these days, as you will all be familiar, is very much and has to be and is expected to be, for reasons that we've already discussed, a multi-channel activity. So folks will occasionally and still use their phones to contact you using voice in the kind of more, in inverted commas, traditional sense, but they will also contact you across a range of different devices, desktop PCs, tablet devices. It might be a kiosk in a public building somewhere that gives them digital access to customer services. And of course, sometimes it will still be the phone. And it's important that you provide that channel of choice. To some extent, there will be kind of operational and to some extent political decisions in terms of how many of those you operate and maintain. But digital self-service is a reality, and I don't think there's a local authority in the council that hasn't already, in the country, that hasn't already made some moves towards it, and some have embraced it fully. So there's the top layer of customer self-service, but the key really to transformation is to drive it through the entire process of an organisation. To that end, My Council Services offers what we call kind of line of business systems and modules, and these enable particular areas of functionality. Some of those are service area specific, so waste is an example of that, but many of them are more generic in nature, and I'll talk about those in a minute. But the ability really to extend that digital customer service piece way beyond that kind of first point of contact, actually trying to extend it all the way through to resolution of a customer's request, requirement, order, retrieval of information, whatever it might be. So the ability to automate and make digital the entire end-to-end process. And to do that, we offer a number of things. So as well as our own technology components, we offer integration to third-party applications, so the ability to securely exchange data and to interact securely and intelligently with other data systems that you will inevitably have in the authority, the ability to manage that data, and the MDM piece, the MDM reference here refers to master data management, so the ability to federate and securely manage and make secure that information that you hold about customers, and the ability to link it up with other data sources under your jurisdiction. And then, of course, the other piece is the ability to automate, to build in automated workflow. So there's a lot going on when you start to think about the broader context and, crucially, the deeper context of enabling end-to-end digital processes. An important component of that, of course, is that you will all have folks that are not just working remotely from a fixed location, so maybe in the current times, working from a home office, but you will still have operatives, both directly employed by the council and third-party contractors, who are out there working in a truly remote sense, and the ability to enable them with digital devices, smartphones and tablets typically, to enable them to receive digital task sheets, to sign things off, to go continue to work both online and offline, but in a digital capacity. And in the middle of all of that, you've got customers that are going to want and need information from you and expect to be kept updated in terms of what's going on with service requests that they've created and submitted. So the ability to send automated and sometimes manual messages back to customers to keep them back in the loop. And then within all of that, automated workflow in the form of a digital rules engine that also exists on the platform. So there are multiple components that make up the My Council Services platform, and we've developed it over the last 10 years now to be a modular system. So you can take different components of it and use it in different ways. So you can either slice that horizontally, as we're doing this morning, and think about My Council Services as a multi-channel digital platform for customer self-service, so operating up at this layer, or you can make it a vertical solution. So we've got a number of customers that work with us just for waste, for example, in which case it's much more of a vertical solution, providing everything from customer contact through to in-cab enablement with sat-nav turn-by-turn directions and round management databases to enable a vertical waste solution. And some customers are using it in all directions as an enterprise platform. And the idea is that you can use it in one way to start with, and you can grow into it over time. So that's a kind of introduction to the platform, as it were. I'll just explode a few of these things out so you get a little bit more detail, and then before we reach the top of the hour, we'll get into some demonstration. We'll kind of show you what some of this stuff looks like if you haven't seen it already. But the CRM and self-service piece that we'll be focusing on primarily today is constituted of a number of different pieces. At its core, there's an eForm designer, so the ability to develop quite sophisticated or indeed very simple eForms, depending on what you want to do. Alongside that, we offer a suite of integrated native mobile applications. So it's effectively tethered to the broader platform, but manifested as a front end as a native mobile app, as I'm guessing all of you will have installed on your smartphones and tablet devices. So the ability to offer both eForms via browser and eForms via integrated native mobile application. We also offer that piece as a My Account enterprise offering, so the ability to allow customers to register, that then gives them access to a universe of their data and their transactions and the things that they may want and need to do with and through the council. That often then links up to something that we call single sign-on. So the ability to register once but have access maybe to data sources that are dotted right across the organisation. I talked about the ability to self-serve in something like a public building. We offer a self-scan solution as part of that. So the ability to effectively use the same technology but in a secure kiosk environment where you can go in, perhaps receive assistance. So the ability really to enable the kind of broad range of digital contact channels for customers, all of that, of course, being carefully and studiously GDPR compliant in that regard. So that's the bits that we're focusing on primarily today. We will dip into a few of the other bits and pieces. I talked about the line of business systems that kind of extend the functionality of that customer self-service piece. We'll look at a couple of the sort of first back office modules, both service desk and contact center, our CRM application. We'll do a quick couple of examples that leverage some of the more detailed or kind of line of business systems. So one of those is schedulings and bookings, the ability to make a reservation or make a booking. License and contracts management, for example, and you'll see a couple of examples of automation as we move through over the next 40 minutes or so. So that's some of the background to that. The mobile working piece, we're not going to focus on that at all today, really. I will give you a kind of quick peek of the native mobile application, which enables our mobile working applications, but I'm not going to really focus on that in the time that we've got together this morning. So that hopefully kind of positions the platform for you and starts to kind of put it in a bit of context in terms of how local authorities are using it. If I just pop up on screen our 25 most recent examples of My Council Services implementations. We've chosen 25 because it fits fairly tightly onto a slide, no more kind of sophisticated logic to it than that, really. We've got just north of 50 UK local authorities that we work with, and they kind of scale up and down from relatively small district and borough authorities up to very large unitaries, and using it in a range of different ways. I won't read through all of these for you. I mentioned that we will share a PDF copy of the slides after the event this morning, so you'll have these to review at your leisure. Just very briefly, in summary, before we kind of get on to take a look at some of the technology, our response to the local authority transformation challenge, if you will, is to always make something self-service where it's appropriate to do so and where it makes sense to do so. And in doing that, think carefully about how you can make that an end-to-end process. So right from point of contact with the customer, right through to resolution of whatever that customer's requirement or request happens to be. There are lots and lots of opportunities to do that, and you should think carefully about how you do that. And the danger is if you have a break point where something goes from being digital to non-digital and becoming much more manual, you often lose much of the benefit that you've derived in the early digital phases. So you should really be trying to think about and challenge your organisation to think about end-to-end digital processes. And if you're doing that, then you will also be inevitably thinking about automation. So you should be using rules and automated workflow to manage the outcomes and the interdependencies in those processes. If you do that well, you'll find it will be cost effective, you'll reduce the financial burden on your local authority, you'll release resources that you can use in other ways and use more effectively. So cost effective is kind of our end of the bargain, making sure that we're doing what we said we would do for the price that we said we would do it. And the other piece that we need to make sure, I mentioned that we work with both kind of relatively small and very large local authority organisations, is we have to make sure we're providing a scalable solution, something that really operates both at pace and at scale. And even the smallest UK local authority, of perhaps a few tens of thousands of residents, if you discount the Scilly Isles at 2,500 or whatever the population there is, but most are certainly measured in the mid to low tens of thousands, if not bigger, then we have to operate at scale, because even a small, relatively small district authority is a busy place with a lot of things to do. So our end of the bargain is being cost effective and scalable. Your end of the bargain is making sure you're challenging yourself about self-service and challenging yourself about automation and making sure you're driving adoption. So that's some of the background. I've put that placeholder in there to remind me to step out of the slides at this point, and we'll start kind of a live demonstration of the platform for the next 35 minutes or so. So I'll skip out of the slides, we'll get rid of my scribbles, and we'll jump across to a browser interface first off. I'm just going to refresh that because it will have probably timed out while I've been talking. But what I'm going to do today, folks, is I'm going to take you through this and go, I suppose, what you would consider chronological order. So we're going to start at the point at which a customer might start. The only difference being is that when we deliver a solution for our customers, so a digital customer self-service solution, we're operating inside and as an integrated component of your .gov.uk domain. So we're not doing that today. We're using a separate demo instance of My Council Services. But when we deliver this for a customer, it's an integrated and fully branded component of your existing web properties, if you've got multiple faces out to your customer base. If you're using the portal solution, which is what we're going to use this morning, then you'll be asking customers to log in, to register, and then subsequently log in. You don't have to do that. You can actually allow customers and deploy forms using our solution that are just accessible as a page on your website or as an element of a page within your website. So you don't have to do what I'm currently doing here, which is logging in. You can just allow customers to pitch up to a form and use it. There are certain processes and certain types of things that you're going to want to get your customers to register for. So if it's a service at the property for which they've got to pay, they're going to have to identify themselves. And it's just really for to show the art of the possible and to demonstrate the point that we use the portal example. But you don't have to have the portal. You can just use individual forms, and it's at your discretion as to whether those individual forms require registration or not. So you can really, the message I'm trying to impart, or the thing that I'm trying to describe, is that the entire platform is completely configurable. So you can set it up to reflect the way that you want your processes to run. So while I've been narrating, I've also been typing, which is something I find difficult to do those two things at the same time, but I seem to have managed it on this occasion. And that's allowed me to log in as a fictitious customer to the demo site that we're going to use to run the demonstration this morning. Before I kind of launch into processes proper, what I'm going to do is just give you a quick tour of the screen layout and the screen real estate. I'll draw your attention over to the left-hand side, where I'm scaling my mouse and my cursor up and down the left-hand sidebar. And this is a configurable list of things that customers can do through and via the portal. Configurable being the important word. You can have it as long or as short as you want. You can have as many things as you want or as few as you want. You can have it organized in different ways. So, for example, if a customer wants to report something, they can click on the report it option. That will take them into a set of nested forms that are all of the kind of typical report it functions. So that's kind of one example of the left-hand sidebar. We'll be dipping into a few of these as we move through over the next few minutes. In the center of the screen, we've got what we call hotspots or widgets. And these typically councils use, configure and customize and brand accordingly to present to their customers the most commonly used tasks or the pieces of information that most customers are looking for, or a certain type of customer is looking for, and to present it based on their profile. So you've got hotspots in the middle. And then on the right-hand side, again, all of this is configurable. It can be turned on, it can be turned off, it can be made more or less busy in terms of the range of content that you're accessing. On the right-hand side, you've got a set of really kind of hooks into either information that the customer might be interested in seeing, so notifications that they've received from the council, messages, electronic messages of one form or another about various subjects, and also a range of management information, if you will, around the kind of service requests that have got outstanding, draft service requests, payments that are due, any tasks that have been assigned that are associated with their service requests, contracts they may have in place. And then here they've also got the ability to hook into other third-party databases. I'm going to show you some of that in a moment. But before we do that, we'll go and do something that's a really kind of widely used function amongst our customers, which is just to look up refuse collection schedules. Probably one of the most widely used functions on most council websites, amongst other things, but certainly a popular one. So I'm going to draw your attention up to Know My Bin Day up here. So if I click on that, that will take me to our first My Council Services screen in terms of a process proper. What it presents me with is a postcode lookup facility. So that would typically be a customer probably putting in their own postcode, but it may not be. It may be an elderly relative that lives in the same borough, or someone that they're helping out that they want to retrieve information about their refuse collection cycle. So if I select a postcode and search for that, what it will do is then link up to the address-based database that sits on the platform. So My Council Services carries with it, in all customer deployments, the full UK NLPG, National Land and Property Gazetteer. That enables us to sync up service requests that are property-based with your version of NLPG, the LLPG, the Local Land and Property Gazetteer. So the idea is that we've got the same address database that you guys are working to, that's so important for kind of property management-based services. So I've typed in a postcode. That obviously links to a number of addresses. In this case, in the Redbridge borough, we use Redbridge as an example, as a demo site. They're actually not a customer. The reason we use Redbridge is that was where our first office was located. That made sense to us to set up a demo around the office in that regard. So I'm going to select an address, 78 Grove Hill, which is in the borough of Redbridge in London, North East London, and I'm going to click on go. What that's going to do then is it's going to effectively knock on the door of the My Council Services Round Management database. So it's using an element of the waste module within My Council Services, but it could equally be going and referencing a third-party database if you're using a different product to do your round management with. We could be integrated to that, and it's retrieving the refuse collection data for that property. So that we can see at 78 Grove Hill, we've got a couple of garden collections coming up. There's two, for some reason, this is a subscribed garden collection service. There's two of them at this property, and then there's a recycling collection, a small wheelie bin, one more small wheelie bin on the 29th. So the customer can very quickly see the data that's pertinent to the property they've looked up in relation to refuse collection. If they then scroll down, what you'll see is a full digital refuse collection calendar. So the ability to present that information to a customer when they want to see it, including exception days and so on and so forth. Crucially, in the digital age, and in terms of extending that transformation out into the personal realm for a customer, they can download that and integrate that and have all those collection dates embedded into their own personal calendar on their smartphone or their tablet or their PC, or all three. Or if they wanted to, they could download a PDF version of that calendar. So I could click on download, and that will download the equivalent of what we're looking at on the screen as a PDF. And if I wanted to, once it's completed that download, I could go and I could look at that. I can open it up, and we can see the calendar. So no need, if you're doing it, to print off and distribute tens of thousands, hundreds of thousands of laminated cards that the crews then have to hook onto the back of people's wheelie bins in the borough, or however you might go about that today. The ability to enable a fully digital and interactive, to a certain extent, refuse collection calendar. So that's a kind of first transaction. More about the retrieval of information than it is about driving a proactive transaction, but a really important function that most councils are engaged with. I'll extend that theme, and we'll take a sort of slightly more sophisticated step in that direction, or more kind of complex step in that direction, by looking up council tax details. So one of the things that I've done by registering and then logging in as a customer, as a demo customer in this example, is I've effectively done what's called a single sign-on. So by registering myself and authenticating myself once, I can then use those registration details to access lots of different data about myself. The thing that I've just done is looking at my refuse collection data for my property. If I want to go to the other end of the scale, and I want to look at some of my financial transactions with the customer, I can also do that. So as a registered and authenticated customer, and I can add my council tax details, my council tax account onto my portal view. I can then, having done that and authenticated myself and proven that I am who I am through digital processes, through multi-step verification, I can then go and view the details of my council tax transaction. So this is data that's sitting outside of My Council Services. It's sitting in a separate database that could be a live revenues and benefits database, or it could be a staging database. In this case, this is a set of synthetic data, but it replicates an integration that we've done for a customer, where we were effectively mirroring on a 24-hour cycle the revenue, or the full revenues and benefits data that was held in Northgate M3, and that was being held securely by another hosting provider that was working with the council, and we were linking to that. So this is a live link to a set, in this case, a set of synthetic data, but the idea is that you can link to your up-to-date and live data. So it's the synthetic council tax data for 78 Grove Hill. If I drop into that, I can start to see the details that sit around that. So I could look at, and this is a really kind of quite deep integration. It looks at the really kind of granular transactional level information that exists around the financial relationship between a customer and the council. So I can drill back and look at historical data going back to 2015 in this case. I can see the details. I can see my payment plans that I'm on. I can go down and I can download individual notifications and bills. It also, in this example, allows to sign up for e-billing. So it's very, very tightly integrated both to the data and the broader revenues and benefits processes. In this case, we're looking at council tax. So if I want to go and drop into the 2017 transactions, I can go and do that. But it gives the customer the ability to self-serve on things that are very high, often very high volume inbound contact reasons for customers, in this case, accessing council tax data. So hopefully that kind of gives you a sense of how information retrieval and doing that in a secure and an authenticated way can really kind of help drive the transformation agenda in that regard. So if I want to step out of that, I just click the back button, or I could just click the home button and go straight back to the home screen. So I'll just let that refresh. And we'll go back one more time. One more. And that should take us back to the home screen. As well as council tax, you can set that same kind of concept and process up for business rates, for private and social housing landlords, and also for benefits data. So if the data exists within the realm of the local authority, and all of those data sources typically do, we can link and we can integrate to them, and you can make them available as part of a single sign-on experience for customers if you want to do that. You don't have to do that all in one go. Certainly for the customer, that is process we're kind of replicating there, albeit with synthetic data. That was done over a series of steps. So they started off with a solution in one space, and then kind of gradually expanded that solution out to include kind of full self-service component. So that's a little bit about retrieval of information. We've looked at refuse collection data for the property. We've looked at the authenticated and validated access to data for financial transactions, in that case, council tax. There's a couple of things we've done that are often very kind of high volume inbound contact reasons for customers. If you want to do something that's a bit more transactional, we might want to go and report something. It could be something really simple. So we might want to report some graffiti on public property, for example. So a simple report it process. I just click on the report it, select a form, and that takes us into our first transactional form, if you will, albeit a very simple one. So the first thing that we ask is the graffiti racially offensive or obscene? If we answer yes to that, then it could take us down a different route. We'll answer no in this case. Is it on public or private property? We'll say it's on public. It's retrieving the name of the customer that's submitting it, so it's using some registration information to retrieve the pretend customer that I'm working, whose profile I'm working under for the demo today. And I might want to put in some particular data. So also there's persistent tagging at this location by our flats. Click on next. You'll notice as we move through the form, you've got a breadcrumb trail across the top. So as much as we possibly can, we follow all of the GDS, Government Digital Service Guidelines, in terms of form design and social interactions. We do leave the detail and the kind of the practicalities of form design, the levers of that control, in the hands of our customers. So you can design a form any way that you want to, but as much as possible, we recommend that you follow those Government Digital Service Guidelines and keep the kind of pages as clean and simple as possible. One of the requirements is a breadcrumb trail across the top, so that the customer knows whether they're on step 3 of a 5-step process or step 3 of a 15-step process. So as we work through, the next thing that we allow customers to do at this point is to add some photographic evidence, if you will. So we might want to click on Add Files. I've got an example of some graffiti here that I might want to add to my transaction. You can control the number of files that are uploaded, the size of those files, the permissible file extensions. So from an information security and security point of view, you can manage all of that. We clearly need to know where this graffiti is happening. So it will pick up my current location. So I guess no one will know where Saxton Nethergate is. It's a small village out in South Norfolk and East Anglia, but I can override that if I want to. So it's using my IP address from my home office of where I currently am today, but I can override that. I can put in a postcode or a street name or whatever I want to do. And again, it will link into LLPG. So I'll say it's at the car parking spaces at the Shrubberies in South Woodford. So we'll relocate it into North East London. We'll give it an incident date of today. We'll give it a priority. You can design these forms in any way that you want. There's nothing to stop you making it more or less sophisticated, capturing more or less data. Then click on next. That will complete the form in terms of bring us to the end of the breadcrumb trail. And then we'll click on submit. And that will create a transaction that will pop it through to the Central My Council Services database. And it will then exist in the customer's data. So if I then dip into service requests, you'll see that count for this customer service request has gone from 199 to 200. I can go and look at that as a customer and see what's going on with it. So you can see I've got a graffiti service request. It's got a service request number. I can see the submission date. I can see where it's submitted to, its current status, and the location of that particular report. I can get a list view, I can get a map view of that data, so I can see where everything is, and I can get a chart view, so I can get all of the management information that I want, should I want it. You can see that Gary Wilcox, my kind of demo customer that I typically use for these sorts of events, has been busy over the last months and years, really, in terms of creating service requests for Redbridge Borough Council, or pretend service requests, we should say. So the customer's got a way of kind of viewing all of their management information in real time. So let's jump back to the home screen again. We'll look at a slightly different process this time, something that's a bit more, I suppose, sophisticated, complex in terms of a process we're going to apply for something this time. And this is going to use one of the extensions, actually the contracts module in this regard. I'm actually going to do an application for green garden waste, and I want to share this with you because it shows a kind of couple of interesting points in terms of building out the sophistication stroke complexity, or kind of range of capability of a process. So this is a sign-up process for green garden waste removal. So my own council, South Norfolk District Council, I'm a customer of theirs. I pay, I think, £38 a year to have a 240-litre brown wheelie bin emptied every 14 days over 10 months of the year. So it's that kind of context that we're enabling in this example. We've again taken this example from one of our customers. This replicates one of the processes from one of our South Wales customers, I think Monmouthshire Council. Again, there's a 5-step process for it. There's a bit of a preamble about the nature of the service. There's some information about address search guidance and so on and so forth, and the nature of the service. So this is all part of a form that can be built up and is all a configurable component. The first thing that we ask the customer to do is to tell us whether they are a new or returning customer, which tells you something about the nature of the transaction that we're running. This is effectively a contract-based process. So we're asking the customer to pay for a service. They're paying the council some money. The council is delivering a service and providing resources to enable that service in the shape of a wheelie bin and a 14-day collection service, or whatever it might be, in return for that payment. So there's both the customer sign-up process for new customers, and then there's the renewal process for returning customers. And what we're using to enable that is our contracts and licensing module as part of the My Council Services suite. So it's extending out the kind of automation and the process management capability. In this example, I'm going to sign up as a new customer, and then we then get a button of how many containers we would like. So this is a commercial transaction in that context. We can have multiple containers if we're happy to pay for them. So I'll click on the number of containers. The first thing it will do is we know it's a garden waste collection. So you can use these kind of permits and contract templates for lots of different services. You can use them for green garden waste. You can use them for accessible transport in the form of blue badges or parking permits in the borough, skip and scaffold licenses, you name it. The permits and contracts and licenses module can operate right across a range of service areas, and we're just showing it in a kind of waste context in this example. So it's £20 per container. If I want to up that as a customer and say I want 2, then I'll pay £40. We'll just go for 1 in this example, and it's an annual charge. I have to tether it to a property, so I'm going to use another Redbridge postcode, and again it will match that back up to an address. So we'll put that against 78 again. We'll give it a reference number, so you can capture other pieces of data as part of the process if you want to. It shows the terms and conditions of that contract process, so the customer can see the primary terms and conditions, the novation policy, the termination policy, the cancellation policy, and that window with all of those details in it tells us that the customer is using the licenses and contracts module of the My Council Services suite. It then writes that transaction back into the ongoing exchange with the customer. It uses the information that it knows about the customer to auto-complete fields where that exists. We're missing a phone number for this customer, so we'll complete some of that data and going to complete the customer's record. We'll click on next. That will take us to the next page of the process, which is to capture the billing details. You'll note from the earlier screen we were ordering a container at £20. At some point we're going to have to pay for that, so it's confirming the billing details for the customer is the next step. You'll notice from the breadcrumb trail at the top, the next stage is to make a payment. So if I click on make payment, then that takes us into our first point of integration. Actually, for this customer, they were using Civica ePay. And we've just left a little screen grab of that in there just kind of to show that. But actually, we're using a test payment gateway with Barclaycard, We've done lots of different payment integrations, but the point really here, folks, is that we're integrating into and securely exchanging data with a third-party application, which is the Council's Payment Gateway. So I click on that Make Payment Here button. That will then do that secure handshake between My Council Services and the Payment Gateway capability. It hands over the order reference, the beneficiary details and the charge details. And then from here on in, it's pretty much standard online shopping, which if you weren't already pre-March, you'll almost certainly be familiar with now. So we put in the customer's details, we put in a test card number, we put in an expiry date and a made-up CVC number, and then we confirm that payment. So then the payment gateway is doing its thing. So My Council Services is not handling the payment. It's your payment card industry compliant payment gateway that is handling that payment, but it is integrated to and tethered to the My Council Services platform, and it will just do a secure and seamless handshake. So it's collected that payment. You can see that that payment has been accepted. If your payment gateway supports multiple attempts to complete a payment, if the first one isn't successful, or different forms of payment collection, so handing off to a virtual agent, so you can have an assisted process with payment over the phone, or chip and pin, we can support all of those things. That's a function of the payment gateway's capability. But if your payment gateway can do it, then we can enable it as part of a digital transaction. So the payment has gone through successfully. We then click on Next, and that then gives the customer an opportunity to summarise everything they've signed up for. So it's a single year of a single container at that location with a price paid, all of the contact details and order reference number, and then we click on Submit, and that then exists in the customer's realm and is then will be handed back to the back office of My Council Services, which is where we'll go in a moment to take a look at some of those details. Before I jump into the back office, I just want to show you a couple of other little bits and pieces, if I may. I've mentioned earlier on that we enable, as well as the browser-based interactions that we've got here, we also offer a suite of native mobile applications. And I'm just going to share with you, if I can, what that looks like. So I'm going to show you the native mobile application. To do that, I need to fire up a little bit of third-party technology that just allows me to share the screen of my tablet. So I'm just doing that while I'm talking, and then I will drag that across so that you can see that. So you should all be seeing a slightly different screen, which is it's a completely standard Android tablet. It's a Galaxy S5, I believe. And if I draw your attention to the bottommost icon in pretty much the center of that screen, you see an NCS demo app installed there. You can also see examples from other customers. So Newport, we've got a test app installed there. But if I open up the demo app, what I'm showing you effectively is an equivalent of the browser-based portal, but manifest as a native mobile application. So if I tap on Report It, for example, all of the same forms that are available to me via the browser are also available in the app. And pretty much everything that I can do via the browser, I can also do via the app. There is one additional piece of functionality I'll just show you very, very briefly. If I just draw your eye down to the bottom of the screen where you can see the self-scanning piece. So a tablet can also be installed in a public space securely, and we provide the pedestals for doing all of that as effectively a self-scanning solution. So you can effectively allow customers, if they haven't got access to a tablet or they don't have access to the internet themselves, they can still interact with the council digitally by having access to the self-scanning solution. And that uses a combination of QR codes to allow a customer to scan a document that will identify them, that can then be verified. So you can allow these sort of semi-automated or semi-mediated processes using our self-scan solution. And more broadly, the accessibility to your digital services, if you're using My Council Services, via browser on any device and also via native mobile application. One of the benefits of the native mobile app is it gives you offline working. That's both important for customers if they're in an area with no signal and they still want to capture an issue that they want to report to you, a fly tip, for example, but it also enables the mobile working piece, which I mentioned we've got a lot of content to get through, so we won't cover that off today. But I did just want to share with you the native mobile application side of things, that we offer both of those. Just for interest, if I just jump out of the app and we go and look at the browser, you've also got access to the full portal. It's fully responsive, so I can log in as a customer here and use that kind of the full function. So I've really got the choice of channel from the point of view of a customer doing things through the medium that they prefer most and that suits them best at any given point in time. So a quick peek at the native mobile application. What we will do next is I'll just get that out of the way and drag that across to my other screen. What we'll do next is we'll jump across to a different browser interface. I do this just because of a natural break, because we just should take a pause at that point and say what we're about to do is everything we've done so far is the sorts of things that a customer would be doing. So everything we've been doing has been customer behaviour and customer transactions. So we've done a number of things. We've looked at bin days or refuse collection schedules for a property. We've reported graffiti. We've been able via single sign-on to access our revs and bends information, our council tax information. We've also signed up for a green garden waste contract with the customer. So we've done quite a lot, and all through self-service. We haven't had to speak to anybody yet. So what I want to show you now is where that data goes and where it ends up if you're using My Council Services as an end-to-end solution. So this time I'm logging in under my own profiles. I'm using my Abavus address, my own Abavus email address, bernie@abavus.co.uk, and a different password, and I'm logging into the administrative back office of My Council Services. So in this context, I'm a trusted user. I'm a council officer effectively in this context. And one of the things that you can see there is the Green Garden Waste transaction that was created at 11:16 today by Gary Wilcox, my pretend customer. And if I drop into the details of that, you can see all of the details of that contract. What we're looking at here is the service desk view of the world. Service desk is our primary case management function, if you will. It gives a council user, a trusted user within the council, a view of the kind of transactional nature of a particular service area or particular service areas. So in this case, we're looking at Gary's recent Green Garden Waste submission or contract application, and we can see, having clicked into that, we can see the customer details, his contact details, the date on which it was submitted. We can see that he's a new customer, that he signed up at this address. And if I scroll down, we can see that a contract has been created, and I can dip into the detail of that contract and look at the specifics of it. And that's effectively segueing into the contracts and licenses and permits module of My Council Services. And from within that, I've then got all of the abilities that I would need to manage that. We can see that the payment was collected. It will also then interface directly with the waste module of My Council Services, had we set it up in that way, and would have created all of the collection tasks on the appropriate round. So you can automate the entire end-to-end process, as well as managing renewals, looking at policy, looking at history, all of the components that you would expect to managing a contract and an ongoing subscription-based service. So we can view that from in this case, we're looking at the waste view of that, but we can chop and change this capability, and we can say, well, we don't want to look at the waste transactions. We might want to look at street scene, for example. So if I want to change that search, and we can slice that by status, by the particular process type, or status, or whatever it happens to be, and we can recut the view of that. And you can also then see when we change that view that in this case I can switch my view and I can see the same customer, Gary Wilcox, at 11:08 today, created a graffiti service request. They reported some unauthorised illicit graffiti close to his property or wherever it happened to be. We can see where that was, and we can see all of the details around that, and we have the ability to manage that, both in an automated way using the rules engine, or indeed in a manual way. So if I want to go and create a task or assign it out to somebody, I can do all of that from a case management perspective. So that's Service Desk, showing us a lens of the world that is very much service area oriented. If, as a customer service function, you want to look at that from a context perspective, from a customer's perspective, you can use the contact center module. So we're going to shift now from Service Desk to Contact Center. So Contact Center is the My Council Services CRM module, and it gives you a very different view of the world that's much more kind of focused and zeroed in on the customer, an individual customer. So I can search for people, services, address, or knowledge, and I've just presented with a simple toolbar. If I've got Gary Wilcox on the phone because he's phoned up, and I'm trying to identify his records, I can just start to type his name into the search box. Also, we can integrate into things like telephony systems and do automated screen popping based on phone number recognition and that sort of thing. But I can find Gary in this example. So Gary's listed there, and I've got a number of other Wilcoxes in the database. But if I then select Gary's record, that then drops me into a comprehensive view of everything that has to do with Gary's interactions with the council. So I can see the Green Garden Waste contract that he created earlier this morning. I can see the graffiti that he reported. I can see a market stall booking event that he did earlier or yesterday. All of his historical transactions. I can also see the interactions that he's had with customer services colleagues at other times, in addition to the one that he's having with me now. So I can see lots of information about Gary that's very useful to me in helping me with whatever his current query might be. I can also complete activities and actions with Gary. So in the same way that he did for himself on the portal, I could, if I wanted to, help him with his refuse collection information and show that calendar. For some reason that doesn't seem to be showing. But I could also send him an email, send him an SMS, create a task that's specific to his property or his person. I can look up his counsellor for him. I can view other interactions. I can do a whole bunch of different things with and for Gary. I can also, from here, look at any further information if I've got the authority to do so. So this is actually using some of the dynamic master data management features of My Council Services to look at additional dynamic data about Gary. But I have to have the permissions as a user to be able to see that. So I can see that Gary's unemployed. I can see that he's got a violent mark against his record and that an appropriate control measure is in place. I can see that he's a vulnerable adult and that he's got his specific vulnerability is impaired mobility and that he suffers from mild dementia. I mean, it's a little bit of overload, but you get the idea. So what we're building and what we're enabling for your customer services staff is for them to have a much broader and richer context for the customer with which they're dealing at any given point in time. So, and the ability actually to transact on behalf of the customer here. So as Gary has access to different forms via the portal, so I can choose here. So if Gary's phoning because there's been a miscollection, I can create that miscollection. It will be based on Gary's waste collection schedule and the permissibility rules around that. So really, as an assisted process, you can do pretty much anything that you need to do. I'm very conscious of time, and we're kind of cramming quite a lot of content in here, and I do want to have you on your way by 11:30 at the latest. So I'm going to make kind of give you a dash through the last few bits and pieces in the last 3 minutes that we've got together. And what I want to kind of give you a sense of is just two quick areas. One is the configuration capability of My Council Services, and to do that, I'm going to, in the back office, I'm going to drop you down and draw your attention to this bottommost option, the administration menu, which really gives you access to, as a user within the council, and not everybody would have access to the administration module. This would be probably your super users and those that are really involved in the configuration, form design processes, so on and so forth, and the ability to configure the platform in any way that you want. So we've been looking at the customer self-service side of things. If I want to go and modify that, I can click on the self-service menu and select tabs, and that allows me to manage the way that the portal looks. So I can see all of the different information options and menu options that I've got turned on, and I can go into those and I can turn them off, I can change them, I can update them. If I go back to administration, if I'm done with my changes there, I can go and design forms from scratch, or I can indeed go into our forms store and I could borrow with pride from another council. So we've been looking at a number of different forms this morning. If I'm looking now for a fly tip form, for example, click on search in the form store. I can go and I can borrow with pride from any of the other UK local authorities that are using My Council Services and have also shared a fly tip form as part of the form store. So within administration, you've got the ability to configure the portal at any given and the forms and any other aspect of My Council Services in any way that you wish or need to do. So you can have it looking one way on a Monday morning, a different way by Monday lunchtime. And then finally, the last thing I wanted to touch on was just some of the reporting capabilities. So I'll draw your attention up to dashboard at the top of the list, so you can get real-time data on any range of transactions, on any range of service areas, over any date window, and you get full kind of graphical representation of exactly what's going on with that particular service area or particular process. So you've got real-time information both on service requests, on customers, and we can see that Gary's my most active customer. On statistics, so channel of access, we can look at information about service level and bookings. So you've got full dashboard reporting capability. And if you want to get into even more detail than that, if I draw your attention down to the analytics option here, you've got a pre-configured suite when that appears on screen of a whole range of different, much more kind of detailed, granular reports that will give you visibility to exactly what's going on from a digital interaction, digital process management perspective. So we've covered quite a lot of ground in the last 30 minutes. I'm just going to bring everything to an orderly conclusion with some really kind of some last recommendations for getting going, really, and then I can let you get on with the rest of your Tuesday. So in terms of advice to get started, the keys to successful transformation, well, we've got a few recommendations. You know, we've been working with a lot of authorities over the years, and we've been at this a while, but I would certainly encourage you to think about service area adoption and analysis of service area adoption. So whilst we've been talking about customer self-service, you're going to have to think about how far you reach into the back office. And our recommendation is to evaluate and rank service areas, read their appetite to adopt or make more digital processes available to customers, and to think about implementing in increments. And don't make it as too difficult for yourself. Select the quick wins, the quick win applications, and publicise recent successes, and use the access to the data using the reporting tools in My Council Services to build successful business cases that showcase the work that you've been doing. And we haven't talked about it in huge detail, but My Council Services is an open platform and can be, you know, in relative terms, can be relatively simple to integrate into third-party applications, as we've shared with you this morning, both payment, both revs and bends, both access to waste data, but they can really extend the range of capability and the scope of the way that your end-to-end processes can run. And to that point, we'd always encourage you to think about developing end-to-end processes. Don't let it stop at just the digital customer service point of contact. Think about how far you can push a process all the way through to digital resolution and mobile working. And if you do those three things and you plan your project carefully, you're more likely than not to be successful. So I'm a minute over time, so my apologies for that, but we're more or less within the 60 minutes. It just remains for me to say thanks very much indeed for joining today's webinar. We hope you found it useful. As I said earlier, we will make the slides available for download, and we will share those with you, as we will do the same with a recording of today's session. And if you've got other questions or you want to get into a more involved conversation, our contact details are at the bottom of that slide and will be included with the pack of information that we share with you over the next 24 to 48 hours. Thank you, folks, and have a pleasant Tuesday. Bye-bye for now.